Our destination was the north, but our journey didn't follow a straight line, and we rested at various abbeys. Thus, it happened that we turned westward, though we ought to have been going east, almost following the line of mountains that from Pisa leads to in the direction of the pilgrim's way to Santiago, pausing in a place which, due to what occurred there, it's better that I do not name, but those lords were liege to the empire, and were the abbots of our order, all in agreement, opposite the heretical, corrupt pope. Our journey last 2 weeks amid various vicissitudes, and during that time I had the opportunity to know, never enough, I remain convinced, my new master. In the page to follow, I shall not indulge in descriptions of persons, except when a facial expression or a gesture appears as a sign of mute but eloquent language. Because, as Boetius says, nothing is more fleeting than external form, which withers and alters like the flowers of the field at the appearance of autumn. And what will be the point of saying today that the abbot above had a stern eye and pale cheeks, when by now he and those around him are dust, and their bodies have the mortal greyness of dust, only their soul, God grant, shining with a light that will never be extinguished. But I would like to describe William at least once, because his singular features struck me, and its characteristic of the young to become bound to an older and wiser man, not only by the spell of his words and the sharpness of his mind, but also by the superficial form of his body, which proves very dear, like the figure of a father whose gestures we study and whose forms, whose smile we observe, without a shadow of loss to pollute this form, perhaps the only that is truly pure of corporal love. In the past, men were handsome and great, now they are children and dwarfs. But this is merely one of the many facts that demonstrate the disaster of an aging world. The young no longer want to study anything. Learning is in decline. The whole world walks on its head. Blind men lead others equally blind and cause them to plunge into abyss. Birds leave the nest before they can fly. The jackass play the lyre, oxen dance. Mary no longer loves the contemplative life, and Martha no longer loves the active life. Leah is sterile. Rachel has a carnal eye. Cato visits brothels. Everything is diverted from its proper course. In those days, thank God, I acquired from my master to desire to learn and a sense of a straight way, which remains even when the past is torturous. Brother William was larger in a stature than a normal man, and so thin that he seemed still taller. His eyes were sharp and penetrating. His thin and slightly beaky eyes gave his countenance the expression of a man on the lookout, even if his long, freckle-covered face, such as I often saw among those born between Hibernia and Northumbria, could occasionally express hesitation and puzzlement. In time, I realized that what seemed a lack of confidence was only curiosity. But at the beginning, I knew little of this virtue, which I thought rather a passion of covetous spirit. I believed instead that the rational spirit should not indulge such passion, but feed only on the truth, which I thought one knows from the outset. William might perhaps have seen 50 springs and was therefore already very old, but his tireless body moved with an agility I myself often lacked. His energy seemed inexhaustible when a burst of activity overwhelmed him, but from time to time, as if his vital spirit had something of the crayfish, he moved backward in moments of inertia, and I watched him lie for hours on my pallet in my cell, uttering barely a few monosyllables without contracting a single muscle of his face. On those occasions, a vacant, absent expression appeared in his eyes, and I would have suspected he was in the power of some vegetal substance capable of producing visions if the obvious temperance of his life hadn't led me to reject this thought. I will not deny, however, that in the course of the journey he sometimes stopped at the edge of a meadow and the entrance to a forest to gather some herb, always the same one, I believe, and he will then chew it with an absorbed look. He kept some of it with him and ate it in the moments of greatest tension, and we had a number of them at the abbey. Once, when I asked him what it was, he said, laughing, that a good Christian can sometimes learn also from the infidels, and when I asked him to let me taste it, he replied that herbs that are good for an old Franciscan are not good for a young Benedictine. During our time together, we didn't have occasion to lead a very regular life. Even at the abbey, we remained up at night and collapsed rarely during the day, nor did we take part regularly in the holy offices. On our journey, however, he seldom stayed awake after compline, and his habits were frugal. Sometimes, also at the abbey, he would spend the whole day walking in the vegetable garden, examining the plants as if they were cyropteses or emeralds, and I saw him roaming about the treasure stripped, looking at the coffee coffer studded with emeralds and chiroprestis as if it were a clump of torn apple. At other times, he would pass an entire day in the great hall of the library, leafing through manuscripts as if seeking nothing but his own enjoyment, while around us the corpses of monks horribly murdered were multiplying. One day I found them strolling in the flower garden without any apparent aim, as if he didn't have to account to God for his works. In my order they had taught me quite a different way of expending my time, and I said so to him. And he answered that the beauty of the cosmos derives not only from unity in variety, but also from variety in unity. This seemed to me an answer dictated by crude common sense, but I learned subsequently that the men of his land often define things in ways in which it seems that the enlightening power of reason had scant function. During our period at the abbey, his hands were always covered with the dust of books, the gold of still fresh illumination, or with yellowish substances he touched in Severus' infirmary. He seemed unable to think save with his hands, an attribute I considered then worthier of a mechanic, but even when his hands touched pates worn by time and friable as unleavened bread, he possessed, it seems to me, the extraordinarily delicate touch, the same that he used in handling his machines. I will tell, in fact, how this strange man carried with him in his bag instruments that I had never seen before then, which he called his wondrous machines. Machines, he said, are an effect of art, which is nature's ape, and they reproduce not its form but the operation itself. He explained to me thus the wonders of the clock, the astrolabe, and the magnet, but at the beginning I feared it was witchcraft, and I pretended to sleep on the certain clear nights when he, with a strange triangle in his hand, stood watching the stars. The Franciscans I had known in Italy and in my own land were simple men, often illiterate, and I expressed to him my amazement at his learning. But he said to me, smiling, that the Franciscans of his island were cast in another mold. Roger Bacon, whom I venerate as my master, teaches that the divine plan will one day encompass the science of machines, which is natural and health magic. And one day it will be possible, by exploiting the power of nature, to create instruments of navigation by which ships will proceed unica homino regente, and far more rapid than those propelled by sails or oars, and there will be wagons that move without animals to pull them, and flying vehicles guided by a man who will flap their wings as if they were those of a bird, and tiny contraptions that lift infinite weights, and small boats that float on the bottom of the sea. When I asked him where these machines were, he told me that they had They had already been made in ancient times, and some even in our own time, except the flying instrument, which I haven't seen, but I know a learned man who has conceived it, and bridges can be built across rivers without columns or other support, and other unheard of machines are possible. But you must not worry if they do not yet exist, because that doesn't mean they will not exist later. And I say to you that God wishes them to be, and certainly they already are in his mind. Even if my friend from Akon denies that ideas exist in such a way, and I do not say this because we can determine the divine nature, but precisely because we cannot set any limit to it. Nor was this the only contradictory proposition I heard him utter, but even now, when I am old and wiser than I was then, I haven't yet understood how he could have such faith in his friend from Akon and at the same time swear by the words of Bacon. It is also true that in those dark times a wise man had to believe things that were in contradiction among themselves. Therefore, of Brother William I have perhaps said things without sense, as if to collect from the very beginning the disjointed impressions of him that I had then, who he was, and what he was doing. My good reader, you will perhaps deduce better from what he did in these days we spent in the Abbey. Nor do I promise you an accomplished design, but rather a tale of events. Those, yes, wondrous and awful. And so, after I had come to know my master day by day, and spent the many hours of our journey in long conversations, which I will recount if I appreciate, we reached the foot of the hill on which the abbey stood, and it's time for my story to approach it, as we did then, and may my hand remain steady as I prepare to tell what happened.